Hey, deep divers, welcome back. Ready to explore something pretty incredible today?
I am.
Yeah, it's going to be cool, I think. We're diving into the world of VR creative applications.
Sounds good.
And we've got some sources to guide us.
Okay.
2 YouTube videos, one from Ganakel Curieux and one from Mornity, and then this really interesting blog post that kind of ties it all together.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, you know, when people think VR, they often think gaming, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But these sources are going to show us that it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how VR has kind of been pigeonholed into that gaming category for so long because there's so many creative apps out there that people just don't even know about.
Yeah, totally. Like just from these sources, we're talking about Adobe Medium, Quill, Gravity Sketch.
Oh, yeah.
Even a VR graffiti simulator. Have you heard of this?
Ah.
King Spray VR.
That's so cool.
That's awesome, right? And I mean,
Yeah.
the variety is just mind-blowing. But it's not even just about having fun. It's about like really changing how creative work gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ganakel talks about this a lot in his video. He was saying that using these VR tools has actually saved him days, sometimes even weeks of work.
Whoa, that's huge.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
I gotta admit, the thing that really gets me is the whole like immersive thing.
Yeah.
You know, like Mornity actually says that VR lets you visit your creation instead of just looking at it on a flat screen.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's really cool being able to step into your own artwork.
It is, right. And think about learning 3D modeling or animation.
Right.
Traditional software, it's like, ugh, learning a whole new language.
It really is.
But VR just makes it so intuitive, you know?
Yeah, and Mornity talks about how he actually sculpted his own hand in VR.
No way.
Yeah, and it just gave him this incredible sense of scale and proportion that you just can't get from a 2D screen.
That's wild. Okay, but here's the kicker. A lot of these apps are totally free.
Seriously.
Or they have free versions that are still amazing, like Adobe Medium, Gravity Sketch.
Right.
It's like VR is making creativity accessible to everyone, not just pros.
Yeah, Mornity makes this point too. He's like, even a 14-year-old can pick up a VR sculpting tool and start creating.
Right.
You don't need years of training like you do with some of that traditional software.
Totally. So it's kind of surprising that he's actually a little disappointed that more art schools aren't embracing VR.
Really?
Yeah. He thinks it could really change how art is taught and learned.
Yeah, his point, I mean, if VR can really speed up workflows and open up all these new possibilities, why wouldn't you want to teach that to students?
Right. It seems like such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree.
So we've talked about how accessible these VR creative tools are, but are we just talking about hobbyists here? Or is this stuff actually being used in the professional world?
Oh, it's definitely being used professionally.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the biggest names in entertainment and design are already incorporating VR into their work.
Okay, like who? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, Pixar actually used VR to design the van in the movie Onward.
No way.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yeah. And then there's John Wick 2. They used VR for pre-visualization, so the directors could basically walk through scenes before they even started filming.
So they were basically making virtual sets in VR.
Exactly.
That's genius. Must save them a ton of time and money.
Right. And it's not just movies. The Futurescope theme park in France, they're using VR and XR, which is like this more advanced kind of VR that blends the real and virtual worlds.
Yeah, I've heard of XR. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so they're using VR and XR in their attractions to create these super immersive experiences.
That sounds amazing. And didn't Mornity work on one of those attractions, the tornado one?
He did. And his reaction to seeing the finished product is just priceless. You can tell he's so proud of it. It really shows how powerful VR can be for creating these experiences that are not just visually stunning, but also really emotionally impactful.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. But before we get too carried away, I'm curious about this trend of hybrid VR and non-VR software. What's that all about?
It's really fascinating. Basically, you have software like Adobe Modeler, which combines the precision of working with the mouse and keyboard with the immersive and intuitive benefits of VR.
So you get the best of both worlds.
Exactly. You can start sculpting something in VR and then fine-tune it with mouse and keyboard later on.
That's really cool. Okay, my head is officially spinning. There are so many cool apps to talk about. Where do we even begin?
Well, we can start with some of the ones that both Ganakel and Mornity really rave about. Dreams, for example, is this incredible app that's exclusive to PlayStation VR. Mornity says the engine is so powerful you can create literally anything you can imagine, but it's designed in a way that even beginners can jump in and start building. It's like the ultimate digital Lego set.
See, that's
Yeah.
the kind of detail I love. It gives you a real sense of what the app is like.
Right. And then there's Figment XR, which allows for multiplayer interactions. Imagine collaborating on a sculpture in real time with someone who's miles away. That's what this app makes possible.
That's wild. So you're basically working in a shared virtual studio.
Exactly. It's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of collaborative creativity.
And for anyone who has ever dreamed of being a graffiti artist but doesn't want to get in trouble with the law, there's King Spray VR.
Yeah, that was so
Oh,
cool.
yeah, Ganakel mentioned that one. He was really impressed with how realistic it is.
He was. He said it accurately simulates the flow and drying time of paint, as well as the different textures of surfaces. It's like you're actually out there tagging walls, but without the mess or legal repercussions.
That's awesome. I'm starting to think there's a VR app for every creative impulse imaginable.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's also Vermilion, which is this hyper-realistic oil painting simulator.
Okay, yeah.
And Ganakel loves that there's no mess to clean up afterward, which, compared to real oil painting, that's a huge bonus.
That's hilarious. So you get all the creative satisfaction without having to deal with turpentine and messy brushes. I love it. Okay, so this all sounds incredible, but let's be real for a second. There have to be some downsides, right? What are some of the challenges you've encountered when using VR for creative work?
Well, one of the big ones they both talk about is fine motor control.
Ah, yeah.
Like VR is amazing for giving you that sense of scale and presence. But when it comes to really tiny details, it could be tough to get that same precision you have with a mouse and keyboard.
Right, right.
It's like, trying to thread a needle with boxing gloves on.
Yeah, exactly. But there are ways around that, right? Like I've seen some apps that have grid systems or snapping tools to help with that.
Exactly.
Right.
And as the technology keeps improving, I think we'll just see more and more of those kinds of features.
That makes sense. Ganakel also talks about the importance of thinking about your whole creative workflow, not just the VR part of it.
Right.
He makes the point that these VR apps are often just one step in the process. You still need to know how to use traditional software like Blender for things like texturing, lighting, rendering, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to integrate VR into a workflow that really takes advantage of its strengths.
Right. Going back to what we were saying about art schools, I wonder if there's also some hesitation because VR feels so new. Maybe there's this feeling that traditional skills are still more important, even if VR can speed things up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's always going to be a little resistance to new technology, especially in fields that really value those traditional methods.
Right.
But as more and more artists and designers start using VR and showing what it can do, hopefully we'll see those attitudes start to change.
I hope so too. Speaking of exciting possibilities, both these YouTubers highlight some seriously groundbreaking ways that VR is being used in professional creative fields.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, for instance, Ganakel mentions how architects are using VR to create these immersive walkthroughs for clients.
Oh, wow.
So they can actually experience a building before it's even built.
That's incredible.
I know, right? It's like stepping into a blueprint.
Yeah, and think about how powerful that is for clients, being able to actually see and feel the space before any construction even begins.
It's got to be a game changer.
Absolutely. It's changing the whole way architects design and interact with their clients.
And Mornity talks about how VR is being used in filmmaking for stuff like pre-visualization and virtual production.
Yeah.
So directors can basically scout locations, block scenes, even try out different camera angles, all within this virtual environment.
It's really revolutionizing the whole process, gives filmmakers so much more control and saves a ton of time and money.
Right. It's wild to think about what VR is going to do for filmmaking in the future.
Totally. And, one example that really stuck with me was Mornity's work on that tornado attraction for the Futuroscope theme park.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was actually involved in designing the concept for that thing using VR.
That's so cool.
It really shows how versatile VR is. We've gone from sculpting hands in a virtual space to designing entire theme park attractions. The possibilities are endless.
Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing applications, the challenges, the mind-blowing potential of VR for creative work.
Yeah.
But let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay.
Which apps are the real standouts? If I want to dive into this world, where should I start?
It's tough because there are so many great options out there.
I bet.
The best app for you is going to depend on your specific needs and what you want to create. But both Ganakel and Mornity consistently praise certain apps for their power, their user-friendliness, their innovation.
Okay, let's hear it. What are their top picks?
Well, Ganakel keeps saying Adobe Medium is his favorite.
Yeah.
He even made a whole tutorial series for it. He loves how intuitive the sculpting tools are and how easy it is to use even for beginners.
It sounds pretty amazing. And didn't he actually use Medium in his own work?
He did. He said it was a key part of his workflow. Being able to quickly prototype 3D models for environments, vehicles, even characters.
Whoa.
But there's a little bit of a bummer here. He mentions that Adobe is no longer actively developing Medium.
Oh, no. Really? That's a shame.
It is.
Yeah.
It's hard to say why they stopped, but hopefully they'll keep supporting it, or maybe even integrate some of its best features into other software.
Fingers crossed. So what's next? What's the new hotness?
Well, Ganakel seems to think that Adobe Modeler might be the successor to Medium.
Oh, okay. Tell me about Modeler. What's it like?
So it's this more advanced sculpting and modeling app that works seamlessly with the entire Substance 3D suite.
Okay.
It's really designed for those professional 3D workflows.
Sounds pretty intense. Is it just for pros, or can a beginner like me wrap their head around it?
It's definitely geared more towards experienced users,
Okay.
but it's always worth checking out.
Right.
And one of the cool things about Modeler is that it's a hybrid app.
Hybrid, what does that mean?
It means you can use it with or without a VR headset.
Oh, interesting.
So you have the flexibility to work in whatever way suits you and your project best.
That's awesome. Flexibility is always a good thing. Okay, so we've got Adobe Medium and Modeler. What other apps should we be checking out?
Well, both YouTubers are also huge fans of Gravity Sketch.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's free and super intuitive, and it's got a ton of powerful modeling tools.
Free! Okay, you've got my attention.
Mornity loves how quickly you can just block out ideas in Gravity Sketch.
Mm-hmm.
He even uses it for professional work. He was talking about this project he did for a luxury brand where he designed a whole VR experience using Gravity Sketch.
Wow, so it's not just a toy for hobbyists then?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And another cool thing about Gravity Sketch is that you can collaborate with other people in real time.
Oh,
So
wow.
you and a friend could be sculpting together in the same virtual space, even if you're miles apart.
Wait, seriously, that's incredible. I love how VR is making all this collaboration possible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, I'm adding Gravity Sketch to my list. What else do we have?
Well, if you've ever dreamed of being a graffiti artist, Ganakel really recommends checking out Kingspray VR.
Oh, yeah. He was saying how realistic it is.
He was. He said it accurately simulates the flow and drying time of paint and all the different textures of surfaces. You could tag walls, trains, anything you could find in the virtual world.
That's so cool and way less messy and illegal than real graffiti.
Exactly. It's a great example of how VR can let you experience things that might not be practical or even possible in real life.
I love that. Okay, I'm sold. What about animation? Are there any good VR apps for that?
Absolutely. If animation is your thing, Ganakel says you have to check out Quill.
Quill. Okay.
He describes it as brilliant, fluid, and simple, and even recommends Mornity's free tutorial series on Quill.
A recommendation from one YouTuber to another, that's high praise?
It is. And Quill has some serious credentials.
Yeah.
It was actually used to create a bunch of award-winning VR animation experiences.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Things like Dear Angelica and Wolves in the Walls.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. Okay, noted. Any other must-have apps I should know about?
Well, if you're into architecture and you want to see what VR can do for that field, Ganakel recommends checking out Arkeo.
Arkeo. I'm not familiar with that one. What's so special about it?
So it's a professional-grade VR app specifically for architects.
Okay.
It lets them design and visualize buildings in a really immersive way.
So you can actually walk through your virtual building and get a feel for it before you start building it in real life.
Exactly. And Ganakel was saying that it can even simulate different lighting conditions based on the time of day and the season. So you get this super realistic sense of how a building will look and feel in different environments.
That's amazing. That must be incredible for presentations, right? Instead of just showing clients blueprints, you can actually take them on a virtual tour.
Exactly. It's another great example of how VR is bridging that gap between imagination and reality in the design world.
Okay, so those are some of the standout apps for VR creative work. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. My list is getting pretty long here. But before I run out and download all of them, what about the hardware? What kind of VR headset do I need to get started with all of this?
That's a great question. And the good news is that VR headsets have become way more affordable in the last few years. You don't need to drop thousands of dollars on some crazy high-end system to experience VR creation.
That's a relief. So what are some good options for someone who's just starting out?
Well, Ganakel seems pretty excited about the MetaQuest 3, which is coming out soon.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that one.
He mentions that it's going to be pretty affordable and it'll offer mixed reality capabilities.
Wait, back up a second. Mixed reality, what's that?
It's basically a technology that blends the virtual and real worlds together even more seamlessly.
Okay.
So instead of being totally immersed in a virtual environment, you can actually interact with virtual objects in your physical space.
So like augmented reality, but even more advanced.
Exactly. Think of it like augmented reality on steroids.
Wow, that sounds super futuristic. So I could be sculpting a virtual clay model in my living room, and I'd actually see it sitting on my coffee table.
Exactly. It opens up all sorts of new possibilities for creative work, and it's something that both Ganakel and Mornity are really excited about.
I can see why. So we've got the MetaQuest 3. Any other headsets worth considering?
Well, Mornity is a big fan of the MetaQuest Pro.
Okay.
He likes the advanced features and how it lets him work on more demanding VR applications.
Makes sense.
But even he's excited to upgrade to the Quest 3 when it comes out because of the improved performance and features.
So it sounds like they both think the Quest 3 is going to be a big step forward for VR creation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm definitely putting that on my wish list. You know, thinking about all of this, here's a question that's been bouncing around in my head. If VR can make these complex creative tools so accessible and empower people to create and collaborate like this, what other fields could it revolutionize? I mean, we've seen it in architecture, filmmaking, art. Where else could VR have a huge impact?
I think we're just scratching the surface. I mean, imagine using VR for education, where students could experience historical events firsthand or dissect a virtual heart in biology class.
Oh, wow.
Or think about using VR for therapy, creating these immersive environments to help people overcome phobias or PTSD.
VR therapy. I never even thought about that, but it makes so much sense.
Right.
Okay, you've convinced me VR is going to change the world in ways we can't even imagine yet.
I think so too. It's such an exciting time to be exploring all this new tech.
Absolutely. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. We've really explored this whole world of VR creative applications, from the amazing apps and how they're being used in the real world to the challenges and the crazy potential of this technology.
So what does this all mean for you, our dear listener? What possibilities does VR hold for your own life or work? We've definitely thrown a lot of information your way, but what we're really hoping is that you walk away feeling inspired. You know, like go out and explore some of these apps. Even if you've never thought of yourself as an artist or a designer, who knows? Maybe you'll discover some hidden talent or find a totally new way to express yourself.
Totally. And remember, VR isn't some far-off futuristic thing. It's here, it's accessible, and it's not even that expensive anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's really time to just jump in and see what you can do with it.
You know, one thing that's really stood out to me through this whole deep dive is this theme of accessibility.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to it, how these tools are putting creative power in the hands of anyone, not just professionals.
It's really true. VR is democratizing creativity in a way that we've never seen before.
Right. And it's not just about individual creativity either, right? We talked about apps like Figment XR where you can have multiple people working on the same project in the same virtual space.
Yeah. Breaking down those geographical barriers, opening up totally new ways for people to work together.
It's really exciting to think about the potential for collaboration that VR is unlocking.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of VR creative applications, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If VR can make these complex creative tools this accessible and empower people to create and collaborate in these amazing new ways, what other parts of our lives could it revolutionize?
Good question.
What do you think?
I mean, could it completely change how we learn? Make education more engaging, more hands-on?
Yeah.
Could it revolutionize healthcare? Give doctors new ways to diagnose and treat patients? Could it even change how we work, how we socialize, how we experience the world around us?
It's a pretty wild thought, right?
It is.
It feels like we're on the verge of something huge, something truly transformative.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me neither.
So until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep your minds open to the incredible possibilities of VR.
See you next time.